Okay. I don't think it's left over. I think we made it special, but I think it's from Chenim Torah. Okay, page 426. We're in the middle of Siman Kuf Nun. We're talking about the different levels of Hashem's revelation specific to His Midas HaMishpat, His attribute of judgment. We know that God in this world judges us. When we do good, we get rewarded, and when we do not so good, not so great things happen. So the Ramchal is now going to continue speaking more about this concept. Okay. I would like to complete the topic that we're discussing. In every attribute of Hashem, there is a topic of that attribute, the nature of the attribute, and the strength of the attribute. So any attribute we're talking about Hashem, you have to describe it, and you have to know its strength. Perush, that is to say, how it reveals itself according to its nature. By the way, just to take a second, my Rosh Yeshiva is a big fan of the Sefer. He considers it very important to getting a general view of the Jewish view of Hashkafa, just on life, of how the world operates, and he considers it very important. So, just want to mention that. I think I've said it before. When we talk about justice, we talk about reward and punishment, right? Believing that Hashem gives reward and punishment is one of the 13 attributes of faith. It's a very important thing in Judaism. Whether it's for kindness or to rebuke us. There are three heads: Midas HaChesed, the attribute of kindness; Midas Hadin, the attribute of justice; and Midas HaRachmim, the attribute of mercy. But the strength of these attributes change based on the different time periods. It gets more or gets less. And we find that this revelation is less or more, lacking or more. What's an example of this? Look at people. In the different nature between people, you can see a representation of the different levels of revelation of Hashem's midos. A human being's, all of his limbs in his body, they're equal. But the way they operate is different from two different people. One person can do what his other friend does. For example, Rabbi Stewart and I have somewhat similar body structure, but Rabbi Stewart's incredibly better at basketball than me. So even though we look similar, we are different in our strength. Or Mikey and me. Mikey can, I'm sure at this point, lift much more weights than I can. He can bench press a lot more than I can. So even though we might look similar, the strength that Mikey has is extremely bigger than mine. Menashe, in a few years, you too. Okay. Even within one person, one human being, he could have different strength at different time periods. When he's younger versus when he's older, when he's maybe just gets up in the morning versus later in the day. This is obvious. So too is this idea. Hashem is constantly operating the world with His attribute of justice. And He keeps all of the laws of creation dependent upon His laws of justice. Whether they're more revealed or less revealed, like we explained. So there are certain times in history, just like you have two people that could look the same, but they have different strengths, or different strengths during their lives, so too Hashem, during different time periods, can reveal His justice more or less. And we talked about that before. We had the 5 levels, where sometimes Hashem's existence and His justice is more manifest than others. We also find differences in days between days of the year. You have holy days and you have non-holy days. The difference is there is the difference between holy days, right? Holy days and non-holy days is the revelation of Hashem's holiness and His hashkacha. The way that the revelation of Hashem's dominion over the world. Like what we're going to explain soon, God willing. So we just had Shabbos, and today is Sunday. The difference between Shabbos and Sunday is that Shabbos, Hashem's is more manifest in creation. His holiness is more felt. His hashkacha is more evident. The way He operates the world is more evident on Shabbos. Therefore, right on Shabbos, you have it's easier to connect to Hashem. Same thing on the holidays, on the Yom Tovim. It's easier for connect to Hashem because Hashem's holiness is more manifest. Whereas today is Sunday. Sunday, it's not as evident in creation. There was a big gadol who said that, you know, I mentioned this before. I think there's a halacha that if you're lost in the forest and you don't know what day it is, you don't know when Shabbos is, you count 7 days and keep Shabbos. So the gadol said, he never understood this halacha. How do you not know if it's Shabbos? He says it just feels different. There's a whole difference, right? He was so in tune with kedusha that he just knew that it was Shabbos, even if he didn't tell him. So he's comparing that, the difference between Shabbos and the days of the week, to the different times with Hashem's revelation in the world. Now we said there's different manifestations and different levels of Hashem's attribute of justice. So the creation and the reasons for that have to reflect those differences. We have to understand the causes for these things, as told us, and how they give birth to what comes out of them. In order to understand this topic well, we have to look into it more deeply, like I'm going to tell you now. Says the neshama. What, you weren't explaining it to me well until now? And the ideas that you told me until now weren't enough to understand how Hashem operates the world? Says the intellect, it's very good what I told you. He says, now I'm going to tell you a different aspect of what we've been learning. That we talked about how there's different levels of how Hashem interacts with the world, specifically his attribute of justice. But not only that, but the creation, the actual reality of creation and the different levels of creation will reflect that level of Hashem, of how Hashem is interacting with the world. He's going to give an example. This is the depth of what I want to teach you. And this is what we have to know now. That how all of creation reflects the specific hanhaga that Hashem is dealing with now. So we mentioned before there were 5 levels. We're on level 2. We're on a level where we do not see Hashem's providence directly in the world. However, we have a Torah, and we have the ability to come close to Hashem. So now we're going to see how the world that we're in now reflects that. We've already mentioned the lowly world which we're in now. We're in a world that is dark and is at a low level. That everything in the world, they are dark and lowly. And we also learned how everything that exists in creation comes from the will of Hashem. And it comes only about through Hashem's decree and his speech. So if we find the world in a lowly place, it's definitely because Hashem created it that way. If Hashem would want to, he could lighten the world very much. He could make it very glorious and very honored. This is obvious, right? Hashem can make the world however he wants. This is obvious. But Hashem chose in this stage to make the world on a lowly level. Regarding the nature of the world and of man, whether he is exalted or in his lowly state, we have a lot of space to look into it and contemplate it. When we look at a human being, we can see the amount of depth of how many high levels he could achieve and the lowliness that he could achieve. There's no end to the details of this. But we could understand the general rules, and they will be great keys for us to understand this, to understand Hashem's action. And I'll tell you, when Hashem wanted to create the world in his attribute of justice, we know that Hashem wanted to make the world where people get rewarded for their deeds and punished for their deeds. Right? Hashem didn't just want to make the world where he gives us everlasting pleasure because we wouldn't have to work for it. He wanted to make a world where we have to earn our reward. So therefore, there has to be in the world good and evil. So there, and that a human being was built in one nature. And he had to operate in one way. That a human being has the opportunity to do both things, good and evil. If Hashem wanted to make the world just according to His goodness and the light of His kindness, had Hashem wanted, He could just make the world, created it through His divine light, and there would only be goodness in the world, and there wouldn't be evil. That's not what Hashem wanted to do. Therefore, what Hashem did is He made the elevation or the lowering of the world dependent upon man himself. What Hashem wanted in the way He operates the world, He wanted in the existence of the world. So what we're saying is that not only are there different levels of how Hashem operates the world, and that we're on level 2, which is a relatively lowly level, but also the physical world that we find ourselves in now is reflective of that hanhaga, of that way that Hashem chose to operate the world. So the physical world reflects how Hashem operates the world. We're going to learn the Olam Haba, when Hashem is just operating the world with kindness and with reward, that's going to change the whole nature of the world. Right? The whole nature of the world is going to change, the whole reality. Al Kain, B'midas HaMishpal, just finish this paragraph. The attribute of justice, Talei Hashpalas HaOlam, Leos Hu V'Inyan Shvelim U'Pchusim, B'zeh Inyan Masha Be'arti L'Chalamala, From Inyan Hashpa'atza Yizbarach. This is what I explained to you earlier when we talked about Hashem's Hashpaz, Hashem's emanations. Shalios Hashpa'atza Yizbarach Shemo Lo Haisa Ru'uya Leos Ela Hashpa Kedusha Rabba V'Dvarim Yikarim V'Nifbadim Ela Shiratza Adam Baruch Hu Lahalbisha B'Dvarim Shvalim Ve'enim Ru'uyim Lo. Really, Hashem could have made the world with just His pure light, so to say. But then the world would have been in this elevated state, and there would be no lacking, there would be no evil. So what Hashem did, He clothed His emanations in a certain, obviously a Kabbalistic clothing, and that allowed the world to exist in a lowly state. And the reason the world exists in a lowly state, like we've mentioned before, is because Hashem wanted to create the world where there's reward and punishment. There can only be reward and punishment if evil exists in the world, and there's a choice if there's free will. So that's why Hashem made this world in the lowly state. And He's going to continue this idea next time, and talk about, we probably should have done the next paragraph, because you read this paragraph you get very depressed that we're just in a lowly world, but he's going to write in the next paragraph, it doesn't mean that the world is just lowly and doesn't have anything, but rather the world also has holiness. We just talked about Shabbos. There is holiness even in this lowly world, and we have the opportunity to connect with it. So he's going to talk about that next time. Okay.